It's 2026 and the EU5 value meta has already changed. What was overpowered just a month ago is no longer, so you need to know what really matters. I want to see you dominating your EU5 runs and beating your friends. Luckily for you, efficacy is one of my values, so let's crack straight on. By the way, we're so close to 5,000 subscribers, so if you could help us on that journey, it'd be much appreciated. Liking and subscribing really helps. Now, let's actually get onto the video. Now, the main debate has often been decentralization versus centralization. And when EU5 first released, centralization was insane. However, ever since the loyalty of subjects modifier has been added, this has been more of a debate, which is good because it means that you can choose which one you push dependent on what style of nation you're going for and what play style. With centralization, you get a huge amount of crown power, reduced proximity cost, and counter-espionage, with the first two being very strong modifiers. But decentralization gives you a huge amount of loyalty for subjects, estate satisfaction recovery, and equilibrium, at the only cost of a slight bit of counter-espionage, a not very important mechanic, especially in single player. So why is loyalty of subjects the important modifier in the debate between the two? Well, there's a 50-point difference between max centralization and max decentralization. That can literally be the difference between a vassal being on 0 loyalty and loyal on 50. With integration being so hard in EU5, cabinet ministers limited, and the speed of it abjectly slow, you often need to vassal spam to maximize your expansion. And this extra 50 loyalty isn't just going to keep them loyal, but it gives you a platform to utilize your subjects' actions on them. Like changing their court language, diverting their trade, or enforcing their culture. All these actions take loyalty, so if you have a higher base, you can do more, and you can bring them around to our values. Your vassal's loyalty is also dependent on your relative power, which means if you have higher base loyalty, by pushing into decentralization and getting that 30 loyalty, you can afford to have more vassals and be a little bit weaker because you've got more space before they go disloyal. And for any values debate, it's worth seeing the privileges and the laws that feed into this slider and which ones have the biggest bonuses for our nation. Such as communal lands reducing your nobles' power and pushing you heavily to decentralization, commoners in the administration allowing your commoners into your cabinet, autonomous councils buffing your legislative efficiency by 10%, and a gigantic one, iterant court, reducing your proximity cost, your move capital cost, enabling rural parliaments, and when your ruler dies, gives you the ability to move your capital for free. Now don't get me wrong, my personal preference is decentralized here, because I like to take as much land as possible, expand out and paint that map. However, it's balanced enough that you can go either way, depending on your nation and your playstyle. For example, let's look at Bohemia. What do you think Bohemia should do? Centralized or decentralized? Well, you could go and min-max all of these vassals and vassalize a hell of a lot more. In which case, to keep them all loyal and maximize their bonuses, decentralized is going to be best for you. Or you work on annexing them. You make yourself very landlocked and very centralized, and that proximity cost reduction would be very useful. So centralized could also be very useful. So for them, it depends on your playstyle. Now, something I also have noticed is that decentralization is stronger for naval countries, like England, than land countries. Why? Well, it's really easy to get control through sea zones, so you're less reliant on that proximity cost buff. And generally, naval nations are more able to go and colonize and exert themselves over the map, so they stand to benefit more from the buffs of decentralization. Ultimately for this one, the decision has to be made not on what you prefer, but what's best for your nation. I do think decentralized is stronger, but you can make centralization work very well for you if you stack enough bonuses, and it scales better into the late game. Oftentimes I find myself, around 1600, converting from decentralization to centralization as I absorb my vassals, become a bigger entity, and I need proximity over those regions. And this late game transition is something I would recommend to you. So now it's a traditionalist versus innovative. And I think the answer here is pretty obvious. It's innovative. Look, traditionalist does give estate satisfaction, cultural tradition, and reduces your stab cost, but it triples your embrace institution cost, which is crazy. Whereas innovative reduces that institution cost by 50%, increases your cultural influence, increases your max literacy at only the small cost of a small increase to your stab investment cost. So why is this such a big difference? The big one is that institution embracement cost. Because it's a scaling cost, which means it goes up by your tax base. If it's tripled rather than halved, you're going to be paying thousands in the early game more, tens of thousands more in the mid game, and hundreds of thousands more ducats in the late game for institutions. That's mental. And what you get in return? A relative difference of 40% in your stability investment cost. The maths don't add up, especially when you consider Traditionalist gives cultural tradition and Innovative gives cultural influence. Now, which one of these values is more important? Cultural tradition is your cultural defense. So if someone's trying to integrate a province you once held, it would slow them down. Whereas cultural influence is your cultural attack. So it speeds up your siegeability and your integration speed. Which one is more important? Especially as a player, when you're more likely to be conquering the map, expanding, taking provinces and needing to integrate them. Not to mention the 10% max literacy which you get for Innovative, which is insane. Buffing your research rate is probably the most important thing that you can do in the entire game. So why not go for this? There's literally no reason. Never go Traditionalist. Especially as Innovative has so many good privileges and reforms, such as urban development grants, which gives monthly development, national assemblies, court of culture that further buffs your cultural influence, same with no censorship, and education of the people, which buffs your literacy for your whole population. Work on this from the start of the game and don't consider anything else. Spiritualist versus Humanist is a bit of a mixed bag, as the modifiers on offer aren't that major. Humanist is definitely better if you're a big sprawling nation, as assimilation speed lets you core provinces faster, increasing your tolerance of heretical and heathen beliefs, reduces unrest in alternative religion provinces, and antagonism religion influence boils down to the effect that religion has on your antagonism or your aggressive expansion, as is known in EU4. If you're attacking someone from a different religion, you get 35% less antagonism, whereas if you're attacking someone from your religion, you get 35% more antagonism. Which means that if you go down Humanist, you're reducing this effect by 50%, allowing you to conquer provinces of your religion with less AE, or less of an increase, but increasing the amount of AE that you would have got if you're attacking someone of a different religion. So this can be quite a substantive modifier. For example, you might want to go Spiritualist and get as much buff to conquering other religion provinces, say for someone like Naples and you want to expand into Tunis early. Whereas if you go Humanist and reduce this influence, you can go somewhere like the Papal States and conquer Italy quicker with less AE. Also, if you get to 50 Innovative and 50 Humanist, you unlock exchange of ideas, giving you monthly research progress, institution growth, and progressing you further to Innovative. It's very, very strong and worth looking at. On the other side, however, Spiritualist does increase your possible clerics, which is stronger than it seems on the surface. Clerics are often high satisfaction, high literacy, and have some really strong pop needs for your economy. For example, fine cloth, normal cloth, furniture, wine, all of this creates more demand in your economy and allows you to make more money. But overall, I think these two are quite a balanced picture, and you should pick which works best for your nation. Now next, onto Aristocracy versus Plutocracy. Now the dynamic for me is that Plutocracy is better, but it's a lot harder to get to the higher levels of it. It reduces your cost of court, increases your trade efficiency, gives you more burghers, and increases their power. Obviously the power can be a bit of an issue, but you can work on this, so it's very, very strong. Whereas Aristocracy increases your nobles' power, which is much, much more of a risk, especially in the early game. Increases your cost of court, which is horrible, at only a few more nobles and higher discipline. The issue of cost of court is that it stacks based on your income, so it can cost you a hell of a lot, especially as the game goes on. But your nobles have a high demand for horses, fine cloth, weaponry, and fur, allowing you to build a strong economy off of them. So it's not as one-sided as it would seem. But I would still definitely side with the fact that Plutocracy is stronger, especially if you're playing an income-focused nation. There are some space for Aristocracy. For example, if you're in the early game and you can't get anywhere near Plutocracy, so it's worth focusing on it to get the maximum amount of buffs out of it as you can in the early game, whilst you swap to Plutocracy later on. Or you're playing a nation about quality and you want to just min-max your unit quality as much as possible. Now onto a major debate, which is quite a bit more controversial than you'd think. Serfdom versus free subjects. And I've loaded up my Portugal game to demonstrate this. We have an insane economy, almost entirely based on our commoners, and they're insanely profitable too. So I don't hate you for thinking, oh, well go serfdom, maximise your tax, and get hella income from your commoners. But I'm not so sure this is the right idea, and as you can see in my Portugal game, I actually went 3 subjects. Sure, serfdom does drastically increase your maximum tax to your peasants, your raw materials output, which will buff your RGOs, which also are an essential component of a peasant economy. And as you can see, we certainly stand to make use of this. So then the question is, why the hell am I still going 3 subjects? Well, it reduces your maximum tax for your peasantry, but only 10%, rather than the 20% buff you get from serfdom. It decreases your peasantry food consumption, which is always good, increases their pot promotion speed, and your monthly prosperity. Now, these buffs might not sound important to you, but they are insane. Just look at this city here. It's 1413 and we still can't fill the jobs inside it. This isn't just high-level populations. This is burghers, and especially labourers. And pot promotion speed increases this, helps us out by promoting your peasants up into these industries. And prosperity is now reliant on an equilibrium point because of its high-level decay. It's no longer just an additive multiplier that gets to 100% in the entire map, which is indirectly a gigantic buff to free subjects' monthly prosperity because it pushes that equilibrium point higher, giving you access to some insane buffs from prosperity and higher levels of them. And just going back to tax for a second, sure, free subjects does reduce the amount you can tax your peasantry, but is this a bad thing? I mean, yes, but nowhere near as bad as it sounds. For the sake of sounding a little bit like Margaret Thatcher, if you tax your peasantry less, they get higher incomes in their own pockets, which means that ducats goes into that estate coffer and then directly into your economy. As you can see, they're using their current income to make quite a lot of buildings, and they're not bad ones at all. Armories are very, very important, and if your peasantry are making these for you, why not? Ultimately, it's up to you and what you want to see out your nation. But for my peasant run, I've gone 3 subjects, so maybe that says a story in itself. Next, on to Belligerent versus Conciliatory. I don't want to spend too long on this one, as the answer is pretty obvious that Belligerent is the best. War score cost, CB creation speed. These are some insane buffs, but only if you're the right type of country. If you're out conquering the map, painting it your colour, then Belligerent is definitely the best choice for you. However, these buffs are useless if you're just going to sit there playing Tool. So if you're playing Tool, go Conciliatory. Get some okay buffs in cabinet efficiency, Diplo rep, and some antagonism changes. But ultimately, if you want to go and conquer provinces and take over the map, go Belligerent. On to quality versus quantity. Quality is a bit of a mixed bag. Increasing your morale recovery speed, which is a decent buff, increasing your military tactics, which is very strong, and giving 25% to your army initiative, which is humongous. Military tactics is essentially a damage reduction on your troops, and army initiative is the chance that that regiment has to enter the battle. So with higher initiative, they enter battles faster. This initiative, by the way, can be very, very useful if you're going down a heavy cavalry type army build, because they have really good stats but low initiative. So if you can increase this, you can get them in the battle faster, on the flanks doing a lot of damage. But on quantity, ultimately, it's much better. It's got reduced army maintenance, making your armies cheaper, allowing you to build a bigger one if you've got economic constraints, increases your possible frontage, letting you get more troops in the battle. Having a numerical advantage on your foe is a gigantic buff, bigger than anything quality can give you. Sure, you have lower initiative, but you can play around this, maximising your frontage, making big battles, and you will reap the rewards. And it reduces your unit food consumption, allowing you to push further into enemy lines, last longer, and cost less to supply. And we all know, if you've got a small one, you need to last longer. Endurance is all that matters. So now back onto topic, and we're faced with the dilemma of offensive versus defensive. Now, I don't want to waste too much time on this one, as offensive, surprise surprise, gives a lot of offensive buffs, and same with defensive, it really buffs up your defence. So ultimately, it just depends on what country you're playing. If you're playing someone like France and you want to go take over the world, which one are you going to choose? Or if you're playing someone like Serbia and you want to make a mountain nation, or specifically Georgia and you want to make your entire nation a fortress, I wonder which one you're going down. Land versus naval is a similar dilemma. It really depends on your country you're playing. However, I truly think naval is better if you've got access to the sea. Maritime presence is so much easier to get, especially in the early game, than control, and it directly reduces your proximity cost from maritime presence. If you reach 50 naval as well, you can unlock the Harbour Administration reform, which is so strong, reducing your naval maintenance, progressing you further into naval, reducing your proximity costs through ports, and increasing your monthly development growth. Whereas if you're a landlocked nation, it obviously makes sense to just boost down land as much as possible, reducing your proximity cost, giving you better trade range, and increasing your RGO size. It's not a bad modifier at all, but it just depends on which country you're going. Let's just have a look here, how easy we can control our provinces through sea zones in comparison to inland. We're getting 90, 84, 88 control in our main ports, whereas 30 only a few provinces away from them. On to a big debate, capital economy versus traditional economy. Traditional economy increases your building cost, which isn't amazing, but vastly increases your RGO output, your population capacity, and your food production. Whereas capital economy decreases this building cost, decreases your food production, decreases your bank interest, and increases your production efficiency. And don't get me wrong, these buffs are very, very strong, albeit situational. The bank interest is only good if you're actively taking loans, something you really need to avoid in EU5. Food production debuff is quite bad, but you can build more buildings like farming villages to account for it. Building cost is always useful, but you get a flat 33% off of your building resources anyway, and production efficiency is very, very good. 20% extra goods produced by all of your buildings will make your market much more competitive. However, if your market is already saturated, then this has limited effect. If you get past 50%, you can unlock bank ledger system, which reduces your trade maintenance, which is humongous by the way, your monthly inflation, and progresses you further to capital economy. It's a very good reform. And there are some really good estate privileges that feed into capital economy, like Land of Commerce, giving production efficiency, Commercial Advisory Council, buffing your trade capacity, and burgher-controlled mining operations in your laws, giving you some further good buffs. Now, traditional economy doesn't have the best estate privileges, but there is one, with the feudal nobility government reform being very, very good, buffing your loyalty of subjects, very useful to combine with a decentralised game. But the reason it's strong is mostly just because of its generic buffs itself. Population capacity is so underrated. Population is arguably the strongest mechanic in the entire game, as everything runs off it. And higher population capacity leads to higher population growth through that available free land modifier. It's not about your building levels, it's about how high your population capacity is. But ultimately here, you need to pick one that fits with your nation. So going traditional economy is someone like Bohemia or Poland with some brilliant RGOs to knock out resources, whereas going capital economy as someone like Milan, who wants to make an insane fine cloth economy and export their goods around the world, is going to be much more efficient. So just pick what's best for you. Finally, out of the generic values, we have individualism versus communalism, which is quite a one-sided debate. Individualism reduces your estate satisfaction equilibrium whilst increasing your army morale, navy morale, and your population migration speed. This is awful. Your estate satisfaction is so integral to your economy and your game, you need to keep it as high as possible. Just to give one example, your estate satisfaction directly influences the buildings they build, and if you have higher estate satisfaction, they're going to be making better buildings for your economy. Whereas army and navy morale really aren't that important at the moment, as battles in EU5 seem to be a battle of attrition. Whether it's your levies being wiped off the map, or your manpower pool being diminished, it's all about that, not how much morale you have for your armies. Don't get me wrong, the migration speed is decent, but you've got to think, this is making a difference of probably 3 to 4 pops per month. In comparison to communalism, it's nothing. Let's take a look at that now. Communalism buffs your estate satisfaction equilibrium, reduces the cost to revoke privileges, which is crazy, reduces your migration speed, which isn't great, but it's not horrific as we mentioned a second ago, and reduces your population join rebels threshold, which is insane. Rebels are such a problem in EU5, so we need to keep them in control at all costs. When you hover over a pop in the Society tab, you can see the limit at which point they join a rebellion. That is the value we're changing here. So if our labourers go below 11% loyalty, they will become a rebel and they'll become loyal again if that satisfaction rises above 27.33%. But the strongest modifier here is revoke privilege cost. We all know how horrible it is when you've got stupidly powerful estates and you can't revoke their privileges. Now, our burghers here, they're really not that bad. Only 29% power, but even then, it costs us 96 stability to revoke a privilege. If we max out our communalism, that'll be a hell of a lot less. We're currently benefiting from a 10% reduction, but that will go to a 50% reduction. That's massive. Communalism also has some really good estate privileges, like commoners allowed in the cabinet, enforced religious unity, religious administration, allow gatherings, whereas individualism can actually hurt you. And it's quite hard to max out in comparison to communalism, which you can get quite easily to 100% during the Black Death. Once it arrives in your country, You have access to a lot of situation actions, which you can use to get your values to sky-high levels. For example, segregate the infected gives you monthly progress by 0.2 to communalism. Expelling the sick gives you 0.5 monthly progress to communalism, so this can get you going pretty quickly. And if you get above 50% communalism, you get access to an event which buffs your population growth, so you can recover from the Black Death quicker and grow your nation in general. There's also some added value sliders as you get further into the game, starting with Mercantilism versus Free Trade. This one's pretty straightforward, as Mercantilism is all about protecting your market, so a perfect example of a value that the Ottomans should push. When you've got lots of markets, getting reduced trade maintenance is very, very good. The trade efficiency doesn't hurt you that much, but the market protection and export cost means that pesky Venice over here can't just steal all of our provinces from our markets and all of our goods for cheap. Whereas if you're Venice, you want to be free trade. You want to expand your influence over external markets so you can take their goods and take them back to your markets and make as much profit off it as possible. And if you're a trade nation anyway, you don't need that much market protection, as you're going to be really, really strong regardless. But outward versus inward is a similar story. You unlock this in the Age of Discovery, and it's essentially whether you want to be an outgoing colonial nation, projecting your power, reducing your antagonism language influence, increasing your diplomatic capacity, your monthly colonial migration, and reducing your cultural tradition, which, if you couldn't remember, is your cultural defence. In comparison to inward, which gives you crown power, cultural tradition, monthly control, reduces your colonial speed, and increases your antagonism language influence. Essentially, whether you want to be a centralised nation, for example Bohemia, you'd want to go inward, get more crown power, defend your culture, higher control, and boost that language influence, whereas if you're a colonial power, you're going to be outward, someone like Portugal, maximising your colonies, improving your diplomatic capacity so you can have more vassals, and propagating your power across the globe. And finally, a Muslim-only one, Mysticism versus Jurisprudence, or however the hell you pronounce it. And it's very, very one-sided. Jurisprudence, or Jurisprudence, however you pronounce it, is vastly superior, buffing your monthly research progress and your cabinet efficiency, in comparison to army morale and pop conversion speed. Work on it if you can, but it's quite hard to get up there. And finally, do I need to talk much about absolutism? It's insane. Just compare the buffs here on screen compared to liberalism. Don't get me wrong, it's not awful, the estate's satisfaction is valuable, but you just want that crown power really. Ultimately, you have to paint a picture of your country, or more likely what you want your country to be, when you design your values. Ultimately, the choice is yours. If you like this video, please subscribe. And if you fancy watching another video, there's a really good one on screen now.